Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions, how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Bridget Schaeffers, founder of the yoga travel company based out of New Zealand. Hi, Bridget.
Hi, Jenn.
So welcome to Curito Connects. Bridget and I met over Zoom, and we just talked about this before recording 2 years ago over our mutual involvement as students of Joan Hyman School of Yoga. Actually, I'm not sure if you're a student of that program, but anyway, community-wise, you're involved. And so Jenn was actually in episode 1 of Curito Connects. So if you're curious, you can take a listen to episode 1. And also Christina. Christina is on, I can't remember which episode, but she's also on Curito Connects. So see where all the connections come together here. And as you can imagine, today's conversation will revolve around discovering one's yoga journey and how listening to your inner wisdom is Bridget's take on how she navigates different challenges she encounters in life. Bridget, let me have you start off by introducing yourself to our listeners today and walk us down your yoga journey and how it translates to the various obstacles that came after and where it led you to starting the yoga travel company in 2018.
Oh, thank you so much, Jenn. It's such an honor and a privilege to chat to you. And you sort of just touched on these beautiful connections, and I very much feel that in the yoga space and in the yoga world. You crossed my path. What was it, 2 years ago? You said
2 years ago, yeah.
This is 2 years ago, and here we are. Yeah, and here we are chatting after what's been an incredible couple of years for everyone collectively. So it's a real joy. It's a real joy to be here to share a part of my story, which of course involves yoga. And I guess we could start where it all began.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered yoga in 2013. Or yoga discovered me. I don't know which way. I was really drawn to travel to India following a really challenging period of my life. So the sort of the 2 years prior had been, I described them as really dark. I had been battling a lot with self-confidence. I was moving through a period of real depression and anxiety and some mental health issues, self-sabotage. It was just the way that I described those years was that I was just really disconnected from my essence, from my true nature, from who I am, and I'd lost sight of that, and that manifested in many different ways. But it sort of felt really difficult for those couple of years.
Could I backtrack you a little bit and have you share with us in terms of, I mean, now that you look back, because obviously it was a past process, what about those negativities, in terms of I guess the examples you could share, what state were you in? Was it maybe social stuff, or was it like the work you were in? Was it familial stuff? In terms of why you felt like you couldn't get out of this loop that you were in of negativity and insecurity and, like you mentioned earlier, all these different emotions.
Yeah. Oh, we can dive right back into the psychology of it all.
You can give the Cliff Note version, the short.
I think ultimately I, for many years, lacked so much confidence, and I've had, like, my upbringing I had a pretty beautiful upbringing, although my parents had separated when I was very young, and I'd moved through, living in 2 different homes, and I had and all the challenges that come with that, I guess. I had a very, successful time at school and things, but I also had moved through a significant period of my life where I had an eating disorder. So I'd suffered. That was in my teenage years. So this is where this sort of lack of confidence piece is really significant in my whole journey, compared to where I am today. So there was the eating disorder, and then actually in my teenage years and then into my early 20s, I just had a huge amount of anxiety and a feeling of not being good enough. I really lacked confidence in many ways. I sort of don't feel like I had much direction. I sort of went to university for 6 weeks and started studying, I can't even remember, money and finance or something, so sort of out of alignment with who I am. Left university, was moving through different jobs, and was just in a period of real self-sabotage. There was I went through a period of being like a lot of drug taking, a lot of drinking, relationships with people that weren't serving me, both from a friendship perspective, but also, romantic relationships that weren't serving me, and this real lack of spark, And this was I was in my mid-20s when I went to India, and it sort of feels like a number of years that were before that were just sort of a blur of all of this sort of anxiety and insecurity and lack of self-confidence, and I didn't really know who I was. I think I didn't really know who I was.
So was you picked India, or India picked you? Was it because you're like your yoga teacher back in New Zealand that you were exposed to, told you about it, or or did you read a book? Did you watch
I know
a movie?
it's crazy, but I cannot answer that because I actually just had this deep inner calling that I can now reflect on, and I believe that my soul called me onto a path, and I fully believe that I was called to India to heal, and that was it. I just literally woke up. Well, it wasn't woke up one day, but I said to my mum at the time, I said, I need to go to India. I don't know why. I don't know what for, but I need to go, and I need to go by myself. That was in the January. And then I said I need to go to India, and I also want to fall in love. Those were my two things. I need to go to India and I want to fall in love. And she's thinking, oh goodness, the years prior had been hectic for her because, she and I are very close, and she's been my rock through all of that challenge. Yeah. So, she's probably got fingers crossed, but, not hopeful that I could sort my life out. And funnily enough, how things work, a few months later, I think it was, I actually met my now husband, and I said to him, actually, I'm going to India. I'm traveling to India for 3 months, but he was here when I got back, so I got both of those wishes.
So okay, yeah, we can.
So to answer your question, no idea. Had an inner calling. And I always get reminded of the quote by Carolyn Myss, and I'll hopefully get this right. The soul always knows what it needs to do to heal itself. The challenge is to silence the mind. Right? So I had this calling. I needed to go to India. I leant into that, which is surprising. I reflect back on it going, I just trusted my gut instinct. Probably for the first time in a long time, I fully trusted my intuition on it, and that led me to India. So, yeah. And then 2 years, number of years prior were pretty dark. And so I arrived in India, and I was in a place called Rishikesh, which you've probably heard of.
Yeah.
Staying in an ashram there, and it was beautiful. It was so simple and so different to anything I'd ever experienced, like just catapulted out of my habitual way of operating, habitual way of thinking, of feeling, and in this other experience that just took my breath away, you know. And it was here that I met a couple of people, and they said, the Dalai Lama is speaking tomorrow in Dharamshala. Do you want to go? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. And then they said, we've got to get on a bus. And I was like, cool, how long is it away? And it was 16 hours. And I was like, oh my goodness. So we got on this bus and traveled overnight all the way to Dharamshala. And we arrived and we listened to the Dalai Lama, which was amazing. And then we were staying in the little backpackers. There was 3 of us sharing a room, I think. And I walked next to this backpackers. There was a little shala, a little yoga shala, and I walked in there for a yoga class, and that was my first experience of yoga with my teacher Mahi. And they were running a teacher training, and it was a 200-hour, and it was really classic because this would never happen in New Zealand. But Mahi just said, "Oh, well, just jump into the 200-hour. Like, if you want to just." They were halfway through, and he said, "Oh, just jump in and do 100 hours." So I sort of hijacked this 200-hour and just did half of it. So for the next 2 weeks, I started the day at 5:30 a.m. and went through till 7 p.m. and did 100 hours of yoga and was hooked.
I'm sorry. I'm just still absorbing everything you just said because I'm just like, a little mind blown by, just you saying like, I felt a calling. I just went, and then I just went with the flow. I literally went with the flow. No hesitation, just going for it, And India's a big country. It's like, how did you pick Rishikesh, right? You could have gone to another state. It's just, prior, extensive research, not that you just went and you met these people and then you took the bus and then one thing led to another. I love it.
Yeah. And you know what? It's so funny though, because you look back on it and you go, gosh, that was such a crossroads. Like, that was a crossroads when I arrived there, because I had these different paths. I had this path of the, depression. I had path of the anxiety. I had path of the self-destructive behavior, the self-sabotage, all of these little roads. And then the way that I describe it is that when I arrived in India and I had that sort of injection into this yogic world quite intensely for 2 weeks, I got to see this other like pathway. And I can now describe that as, this path of light. And I can only describe that now, and it's been what? How many years? 8, 9 years after? Can't do math. I'm not very good at math. My husband always tells me I'm not good at math.
It's been a few years after.
Yeah, it's been many years after. And I go, what I can now articulate is that it was during that process that I was able to remember my true nature. And my true nature, as everyone's true nature, is unconditional love and divine light. And there was a glimpse. So there I had this glimpse, and that led me in a different direction. So when I say yoga changed the direction of my life, like, I hand on heart say that, because it did. And it was a turning point.
So you finished the training, the 100, the 100-hour training.
Yeah.
and
got a certificate. I've still got the certificate.
And did you have a deadline to when you were going to go back home, or were you like, I'm just going to keep going until I feel the calling to go home? And at this point, where was your mind at, like in terms of what next, if there was a what next, or you were just really purely being in the moment?
Yeah, so I had actually planned to go from India to Thailand, which in hindsight was the kind of the wrong way around, because I was also very into Muay Thai, and I was teaching at the gym, and I was teaching body combat at Les Mills and boxing and things. So I wanted to go to this Muay Thai gym, and so I'd actually decided to go and do some time. I think I was in Phuket. I can't quite remember. But after India, I was heading to Thailand to spend a few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks in a Muay Thai camp. And I left India in this sort of Zen kind of and I went straight into this intense, violent, I guess. And it's not violent because it's a sport, but it's
High
this.
intensity. High
Oh
intensity.
my gosh! And I was like, cannot compute. Like, I just wanted to go back to India, but yet here I was, then into this intense training regime with um, huge a huge Muay Thai camp, and I found it really hard to make that transition into that. But then after that, I'd planned to go home. Yeah,
So you didn't quit. You finished the training.
I
You
did the
finished.
training. So I finished my 100 hours with in India, and then I went to Thailand. Did some weeks, a few weeks at the Muay Thai camp, and then went home. But I said to my teacher Mahi, I said, "Look, I'll be back. I'll come back to you in 2 years' time, and I'll do my 200-hour teach training with you." And I did. I went back in 2015, and that's when I did my yoga teach training. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and that was kind of when it really, I guess, solidified, crystallized my belief in yoga's capacity to heal and transform.
Mm.
Um, and it was then that obviously I came back and started the teaching journey after that. So yeah,
And
yeah,
remind me again, because we had chatted about this when we first met, but you weren't teaching full time. You also had like another career, correct? Like you were.
yeah.
So can we dive in a little bit about that in terms of, so now you've seen the light, you've, experienced like zenness, you've found yourself, and you kind of, I'm not going to go all the way and say you found your purpose, but just you understood where you are now, and your love for yourself here, right? And then you come home and you're like, okay, well, I'm back. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling positive. I have a lot of love to give now. You know, and
I'm laughing because like it's just so classic that life is so non-linear like that, right? So it's
yeah,
like, oh, like I'm high up on the top of the mountain, and then like the next minute you're like down in the valley of despair because that's life. It's like this. I'm laughing because since that time, it's just been this like undulating journey of light and dark, of like, connected into feeling really connected and at peace with myself and easeful. And then life will just throw you off, and something will happen and you'll have to then circle back to the practices
yeah.
because life, right? Beautiful and turbulent simultaneously. It's like that duality that we exist in is so challenging. It just made me laugh and thinking like, I'd seen the light. It was like real eat, pray, love, so cliche, found yourself in India. And then what happened was I came back and I started, and then I was in the corporate world as a project manager for many years and utterly unhappy, totally unhappy, still had all of the anxieties and the lack of confidence. And
But was dating your now husband, right? You had that too, right? Because India.
Yeah, so Tim was there. He was there through thick and thin. He, and he's been there, and he's amazing. He's been there through all of that journey. And he even now calls it, where are we at? Are we at the top of the roller coaster or at the bottom of the bloody roller coaster? And I've come to realize that actually, I don't know if other people can relate to this, but I'm just never going to be a straight line. Like I'm very up and down. As life is up and down. And what I now try to do is try to level that out a little bit through some of these practices. I think that's why I felt really connected to yoga and meditation and that whole world, was that it gave me this sense of ease and peace within such a turbulent mind, this racing mind. And so yeah, it's been a journey. I was in the corporate world for a long time, and actually only left the corporate world when I started the Yoga Travel Co. And that was pretty significant as well, to step out of that and fully into something that was a startup and required a lot of confidence and surrendering to whatever was going to unfold. Yeah.
And how did you decide? or at which point were you like, I'm throwing in my towel with this corporate job? And I have this idea and this dream to start up this company where I can also take people who are seeking such a journey, right? We talked about this before we started recording, to go
Yeah.
on these retreats and have these experiences in a more comfortable way. Not the way you did it, right? It's like just go off on but in a with a group and more hand holding. Yeah, at what point did that switch turn on for you where you're like, I'm going all in? Like that's and again to your point with the theme of today's conversation is you really
Mm.
went with how you felt. Like you're like, that's my calling. I'm just gonna do my own thing.
Yeah, it really was, but it also wasn't easy, and it wasn't, I guess it wasn't black and white, and I think I grappled with it for a long time. And even actually, I should have said this, even when I started the Yoga Travel Co., I had one foot in, one foot out. I was still contracting, and I've done contracting on the side as well. So it's been paired side by side. And only in more recent times have I now stepped into it fully. Um, I think I remember this one time when I was in my corporate job that I actually left, and I did 6 months on the business to start it up. Um, and I like literally wrote a resignation letter because I just got to the point where I was like, there is such a lack of inner alignment with what I'm doing for the majority of my week. So as we know, if you're working full time in a full time job, 40 hours a week or thereabouts, it's a significant chunk of time to be doing something that you don't actually feel is serving your purpose, right? And for me, it was like I wanted to be of service. I wanted to guide and help people to have these experiences that literally changed my life, and introduce people to these ancient practices that everybody needs yoga. Like every single person needs yoga. So we need to get more people to know about yoga. So I was like, right, when we share yoga with the world, everyone needs to have yoga because then the world will be a much kinder place, and people will be at more peace with themselves. And then it's a big plan, right? It's obviously big ideas, big dreams. But
It's good
it
to
got
have
to the
big
point
dreams. It's good to have
where
big dreams.
so I wrote my resignation letter. I didn't actually resign until a number of months later, but I kind of wrote it as this point in time to say, like, this has got to happen, and I can't keep fighting that. What I also didn't mention as well as pre-corporate world, I was actually in travel. So I was a travel agent for 6 or 7 years. So what I wanted to do was marry together this travel experience with yoga and with my love of people and sharing, and that's where the synergy of the business came from. And it was scary to step into that fully, and it required a lot of vulnerability, and it still does.
Hmm.
I'm still in my mind sometimes going, oh, I just like, maybe I just go get a little contract or a job that's got a stable income, and I can So you kind of pulled, yeah, for sure. It takes a lot of vulnerability to be working, to step into something that you believe in without knowing what the outcome is going to be. And it takes vulnerability to trust that path. But what I used to have is I used to be very black and white as well in my thinking that in order to embody yoga and the teachings and my dharma and my purpose, I have to be fully in it. This was my narrative for so long. And now it's changed. Now I believe that if I can do this and have this business and teach yoga and maybe do these retreats, and then maybe I might need to like float into some other work to bring in a stable income for the family, then that's all fluid. Like I'm much more fluid with it. And this is a really good point, I think, for people that are looking to start something new, that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can have a side hustle. You can do both. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to dive in and just do that. But there is room for all of it, and being fluid to then, do whatever's calling you in that time.
Yeah. Oh, I like how you put that together. I think that was very like beautifully stated. Because I think
Yeah.
a lot that's something a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, right? Like they feel a calling to do what they're so passionate about because they're so frustrated every day going in to that corporate job. But they're like, but it's giving me stable income every month. And like if I let go of that, then I have to go all in with this. Do I have to make that choice, or can I do both? And I think to your point, it's really what works for you. There's no one can tell you what's the right or wrong way to do it. It's just up here in your head. You need to decide for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and also realizing that, a lot of my decisions that have been great decisions have not come necessarily from overthinking it, but from leaning into the felt how I feel and my intuition, like that instinctive calling to go to India. Good decision. Good decision. Listen to my body, listen to that gut feel. So now when I am faced with big decisions, or I'm trying to work out which direction to go in, I really try to lean into some of the practices like meditation, like listening to my body, like feeling into that intuitive guidance, because then I can be. Otherwise, I'm in the rabbit holes of the corridors of the mind, and that can be hard to make intuitive based decisions from. Um, Easier said than done because I tend to overthink things a lot.
I think majority of us overthink things a lot. And not only that, I think, to your point of yoga practicing, and um, I tend to try to be a little bit more, middle ground on this comment because I do feel like certain people might not gravitate towards yoga. Running marathons is their meditation and that works for them. So I always kind of feel like whatever resonates with you to find that clarity in mind, or whatever it is for you to be more in tune with yourself, right? To be able to make those decisions as we were talking about, because it is hard. And again, we talked about this before recording, but it's like you go off to these retreats and these trainings or travel or whatever it is you as an individual like to do to recharge yourself, or get a boost of perspective, and then you come back home to where reality is, and how do we integrate that, right? How do we integrate the blissfulness that we felt or the clarity that we had, and go, okay, now I have to, there's, you have, whether you have kids or you have a big family, and then there's the job, and then there's like social settings and the city, and or for those who live in cities. If you don't live in cities, then that you might have other things you have to deal with, like tending to your farm and your garden. um it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I really love what you first said. That meditation, I believe, I'll use the word meditation, but really, what I'm trying to say is it doesn't it doesn't necessarily need to be cross-legged, with your eyes closed, connecting to source, right? Meditation is essentially, I believe, anything that brings you into the present moment, because in the present moment there's this remembrance of your true nature. And so, like you said, running a marathon, surfing, dancing, playing with your
Painting.
children,
Yeah.
painting, like cooking a beautiful meal, walking in nature. All of these things are meditations, right?
Hmm.
And so I feel that, and all of those things, I think, like if I go for a beautiful big bushwalk, I find myself, I go into a really creative process. So if I'm struggling with something creatively, things will drop in, So I think that it's really important to lean into the endeavors that bring you into the present moment, whether that be any of those or yoga. That's just the access point. There's many access points.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also further to your point, as well, yes, sometimes when you transport yourself out of your habitual life, like I did when I went to India, and into another environment, be it a retreat, be it something else that's out of the ordinary, be it travel. This happens all the time. When you travel and you're just like, gosh, I just feel carefree and free spirit and so happy, and, walking on water. It's just because you're just living life in the present moment. And And that's why I think that when people come onto these retreats, and similar to my experience on the teacher training in India, is that you leave those so in your habitual operating mode of life, there's obviously a number of stresses because of life and all of that, work, relationships, family, responsibilities, but also habitual ways of thinking. So there's the grooves in the mind where it's like thought patterning over and over. And I think when you go on retreat, you circuit break that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can dive into some of the teachings, and that's where you get that real sort of sense of learning and transformation. And then, yeah, like you say, having to integrate that back into life is the practice, right? Is the
It
practice. How can you bring in the sadhana, the ritual, to actually weave that through your daily life?
mm,
And that's the ongoing practice. And for me personally, I would love to say that I wake up at 5 a.m. every day, do some chanting, do some yoga, do some breath work, do some, walk. And it's just like absolutely the polar opposite in my life at the moment with 2 young kids. And so for me, it's like, when can I circle back to the practice, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day? What can I do just for 5 minutes today? Could it be, I just, like, before this, I just lit a candle and I just did a bit of white saging, and I was like, right, I'm set now. Some days I might be able to take a walk or do a yoga class, but it's like, how do you circle back in to just re-energize?
oh, you totally just transitioned for me because you answered how I was going to say. So, I mean, because I always ask this towards the end of a
Anyway.
conversation. I always usually ask this towards the end of a conversation, which is like, okay, well, like, thanks for sharing your journey, and we're all still on the journey. You're we didn't even get into where is the yoga travel company now, and is it pivoting, and how did COVID affect it, and where was your mindset when that all happened? And I hope it's picking up now. It sounds like it is, because for those who are interested, you do have 2 Bali retreats coming up in 2023 in May and October, right? So I'll provide the links and people can look that up. But it's like, within all that, what do you do to keep yourself grounded? And it sounds like you just nicely put it, you light a candle when you can, or, you white sage your space when you can, just so that you could quickly kind of come into a space where, you can find that inner moment.
Yeah, it's really those moments. And I think we operate in a culture, in a society, in a world at the moment that is time poor, whether that be a perception or not. We've got responsibilities, and being, a busy mum of 2, it's, it can be hard to find those pockets of time for myself. But I think it's really important to prioritize self-care. And for me, that comes in the form of, doing some, taking a few moments to sit and breathe and do meditation. And by meditation, I mean just literally sitting and following my breath. It's not complicated. And other ways that I might do it is self-massage, which is a technique I learnt on an Ayurvedic retreat that you might actually do if you're going to do your Panchakarma. And I love self-massage as a way of connecting to your physical body, but also an act of self-love. And of course, a physical practice of yoga. All these things, walking in the bush. It just, taking the time to do the things that bring you joy. I think
Yeah.
joy is a big one.
So if I then said to you, what would you tell our audience that's listening into this episode today? Like, what advice would you give them? I mean, I think you just
Mm.
kind of said it, like, find your joy. What makes you happy? It
Find
could
your
also
joy.
it could also be
Yeah,
buying your favorite cup of coffee or tea,
really.
and just visiting that shop you always go to, and that brings you joy, and that could be your moment.
Yeah. I think I'm very, what's the word? I used to like set myself up to fail all the time. So I was very much this all or nothing personality type, quite A type personality, had to achieve 100 things a day. And so, a couple of years back, it would be a list. If I'd write I can see it in my old notebooks. It's like 21 days of like, okay, every day you must do 30 minutes of meditation, do a yoga class, do exercise for 30 minutes, list. And I'd get to day 2 and I'd get to one day and I've done one thing on the list and I've failed, So what I've tried to do in recent times is to reframe it. So instead of having something to do each day, I created it to say, do something that brings you joy. Do something that enables you to enhance your creativity. And the third one for me was move your body. So however that looks, it could be putting a soundtrack on and dancing for a soundtrack, or it could be, doing something really like a HIIT workout, but move your body, do something that brings you closer to your creativity, because that's beautiful, beautiful magic when you can be creative, and do something that brings you joy. That could be a glass of rosé. That could be,
oh yeah, 100%.
But do the things that bring you joy, because life is too short not to be joyful. And that's, probably idealistic. There's obviously a lot of challenges in life too, but do things that bring you joy, because you'll walk with more lightness in your body and in your essence.
Okay. Before we close off, one last question for you is, so obviously you would recommend people, if they have the opportunity and the means to go to India and go to an ashram and really experience that journey, so to speak. But for those who perhaps may not be so called to do that, or can't, what books or podcast or, or mentors that you have encountered in your time so far that you would recommend to other people that has helped you?
Goodness, big question. So one of my I'll tell you about a few people so in terms of not being very articulate, one of the things that I find really powerful on my journey have been quotes, both because I use them when I teach, but also I just froth off quotes. And so you will have obviously heard of Rumi.
Yes.
So anything Rumi, I've got the Rumi Oracle right here. Rumi Oracle. So I get really inspired by quotes. So and so I follow, things on Instagram and things like that are just, spill out all these different quotes. So Rumi quotes. One of my favorite books of all time is The Radiance Sutras by Lauren Roche. I think I've pronounced that right. I hope I have. What else? Anything by Alan Carr. Is it Alan Carr? No, Alan Carr, not Alan Carr. What's his name?
That's okay. You'll tell me later and I'll include it in the episode.
I can send you a list.
And I'll provide that in the episode links so people can refer to it.
Yes. Yeah, that'll be really cool, because I do have a few things. And yeah, it's just all of those things. Like for me, the big one is quotes and poems, just bring you straight into the, present moment.
Awesome. I also agree, because I basically every week on Curito Connects' social, there's always quotes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're short on time. So, we could keep going. There's so many angles this conversation could spread off to. But thank you so much for sharing and for your time. Happy holidays. And I will provide all your information in the episode guideline below, so people can reach out, follow you, or if they're curious and interested, they can maybe participate in one of your retreats that you're planning. And yeah, I hope, still ongoing, but we'll be still in touch and maybe meet in person one day.
We are 100% going to cross paths in physical form.
Yes.
One day. Yes, for sure.
Wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. What a joy to speak to you. It's always a breeze, absolute breeze. So thank you for having me. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects.
For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.